To be a researcher is a life of learning. Every day there is something new to be studied. And one has the great privilege of being able to share that knowledge with other people, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom. That combination of knowledge that is applied, that can make a difference, and contributing to that state of understanding, pushing the boundaries of what we know, I think it's a big reason for why I decided to become an academic. I am Francisco Aguilar. I am a professor in the Department of Forest Economics. In the context of forests, I like to study how to quantify what we value, this abstract concept of what we like, what's important to us, and why we value it. Whether it's a wood product, whether it's forest land, or the services that we get from forests, like clean water. That interconnection between why we value, how we value it, and the impact that our actions have on those resources is a central focus of my research. As a professor, the biggest drive and motivation is that of the next question. What comes after the current question, and you have come up with answers and possible answers to that. What is the next question? What is the next answer? I think that drive and quest for knowledge is a big motivation for what I do. In the long term, I hope to make a positive change in the lives of people, in the conditions of the forest resource, nationally and globally. And that's a big aspiration with my research program.
Welcome, Francisco Aguilar.
Hey, Malin.
Hey. You are a US citizen, born in Ecuador, studied in Costa Rica, Great Britain, and the US. And in the US, you also got your doctoral degree. You have received several awards for your engagement in nature conservation and the development of the forestry sector in the US. Then you moved to Sweden in 2018 to work at SLU. What can Sweden and SLU offer you as a researcher?
And it's a great way to start a conversation because I see my life as a big puzzle. And starting with my parents, my academic upbringing, my colleagues, my grad students, every person, every individual, every experience has a piece in that big complex puzzle. And to me, that reflects a lot on sustainability. Because sustainability is a big, complex puzzle. And SLU offers that platform to look at that puzzle with very different disciplines, state-of-the-art science going on, excellent colleagues and infrastructure, so we can tackle sustainability issues. This is very complex, and I think that diversity of disciplines and expertise, very applied, makes SLU a great place to work and do research.
Thank you. In the video, you said that you're interested in how to quantify what people value in the context of forests. Could you tell us something about how research in your field is performed?
So within forest economics, we use a lot of information, data, things that we can try to measure to look at relationships. So there are data, there's information that's already there. For instance, in a lot of my work, I look at inventory information and where the industry locates and see how that relationship is established and how the presence of the forest industry influences conditions of the forest. It's a reflection of the values for the industry and what we want from the industry to provide to society. In another instance, that data don't quite exist. So we have to come up with it. We have to ask you, others, what do you think about certain environmental conditions? How would you think if you were to have a little extra charge in the bill of your water bill for your home, for your personal consumption, if that helps promote conservation? Will you be willing to pay that little extra surcharge in your bill to ensure that outcome? So we look at two different sets of data, one that already exists, another one where we try to infer preferences and try to look at behavior in more of an experimental setup.
Okay. why don't you tell us some more about your research? So please enter the stage, Francisco, and we will chat more afterwards. So I would like to introduce Francisco Aguilar, Professor of Forest Economics, talking about more than money, forest economics as a tool to better understand sustainability. Please, Francisco.
When I ask you, what comes to your mind when I say the word economics? Do you think of a banknote, perhaps, and having the face of Astrid Lindgren or Queen Elizabeth II? In my case, I think of George Washington, actually. And if you think of economics and you think of money, it's because very, very often we look at money to see how we express ourselves, how we express what we like, what we don't like, what we love, what we fear, what we are willing to trade in to get something in return. And forests offer a wonderful opportunity to look at those trade-offs, look at what we value in the forest as well as what we get from the forests. The clean air, the clean water, the wildlife habitat. Forest economics represents and captures a lot of those values. And money can be an instrument that can help us achieve some of the outcomes that we want as society or things that we want to avoid. So I'll mention a couple of them. Let's start with tropical deforestation and degradation. It entails the process where tropical forests are cleared and we have something else coming in instead. Maybe you have heard about oil palm plantations, which doesn't happen only in Indonesia, but across the tropics. Degradation is a different process where actually individual trees are removed, usually for their timber value. And over the landscape, you see those species being extracted and degraded, extirpated from the landscape in a manner that's not sustainable. Now, I tell you up front, many programs have been implemented that they pay forest owners, they compensate forest owners in a way that they will not encourage, they will not engage in that kind of behavior, such as degrading the landscape. And economics tells us that those compensations do make a difference, but it's not enough to really address the challenge that we have before us. Why, you will ask? Well, we have to think about the people behind that process. The individuals who engage in that degradation, they don't do it because they're bad people. They need money for education, for healthcare. It's part of their livelihoods, of their living. So to really address the problem, we have to look at lives and livelihoods. Money will make a difference, but will not be enough. Money can make a difference, but alone will do no wonders. Closer to us in boreal latitudes, at times I'm hearing this public debate where it seems like we have this dichotomy, stark differences, where it seems like we have to completely avoid any kind of management and protect all forests. And I have to tell you that in my opinion, that kind of dialogue is counter to any kind of sustainability outcome. Economics reminds us that having too much of something, too much of anything, is having too little of something else. We have to look at what is the right balance in our values to protect our forests and to manage them in a way that it is sustainable and is compatible with what we value. Perhaps wood energy is a good example to that extent. Wood energy entails the use of wood and wood fibers to turn it into energy. If you have a fireplace, that's a type of wood energy. Down the street, maybe there is a power plant and produces electricity and heat from wood chips. That's wood energy. And often I hear this debate and blanket statements where wood is labeled not, or labeled wood energy is carbon neutral, wood energy is or is not renewable. And I move away from those blanket statements. My own research and that of many others points that wood energy can be carbon neutral. Wood energy can be renewable, clean, and efficient. Show me. Show me the numbers. And we can see that with the right context, with the right platform, checks and balances, wood energy can be good, can be sustained renewable energy goals as much as ecological objectives. It can do a lot of good. But we need to have the right policies and frames to make that happen. Fortunately, in developed economies, in boreal and temperate regions, much of that is already in place. We look at the renewability of the energy, we look at the forest landscape and making sure that the carbon stocks within that landscape is not depleted. We have a system in place. It can be improved, certainly so. But to say that a system is not valid or should be thrown away is just not conducive to sustainability. So I already provided two examples as degradation in the tropics and wood energy in temperate areas. The very same market signals that create value for fibers can have negative or possibly positive outcomes. It is the context where they happen. In Sweden, we have the rule of law, we can monitor things, we have regulations that can be enforced, forests that have to be managed in a certain way. We have a system in place that can allow that sustainable management to happen. And to that extent, we need policy that is based on the best available science, not the next hashtag. And that's why we're here at SLU, to provide the best science possible to policymakers. There is a lot carrying on the shoulders of policymakers to meet the goals for sustainability. The industry has a big responsibility to play, as do forest owners, conservation groups. But I have my responsibility, you and we have a big responsibility with sustainability. And one of the ways in which we exercise that responsibility is through our consumption. We consume everyday things, from buying paper or maybe a new table for the house. Big part of your final decision to buy that product or not. But at times, even more important than that price tag is your environment, where you buy the product, what you expect others think you should be buying or doing. Your own expectations for the environment have at times a much bigger weight on your final decision as a consumer than price does. We need more consumers who are better informed about the impact of the choices that we make. Much more. We need more informed consumers than we need online influencers. Today is the 29th of April, year 2021. And over 1 year into this global pandemic of COVID, we have all experienced some level of personal loss. Tragic loss, and it will continue in the near future. Here in Sweden, we have had recommendations for us to stay at home, to be confined, and keep social distancing from one another, which is very good. We're spending more time at home, and as we spend more time at home, we start looking at that, okay, well, maybe that door needs replacement, or we're thinking about the new deck to be on the patio. Timber prices have gone up by 20-25% compared to a year ago, because we want more of that timber since we're spending more time at home. We want that home improvement project to come to life. My wife does too. We also are spending more time at home, but we're longing for the opportunity to go outside. And that's one of the safe things we can do during the pandemic, is go take a walk in the forest. I do usually during lunchtime with my wife. We live in Bäckbyhåla near the Umeå Arboretum. We get to see woodpeckers on almost a daily basis. The last week we saw deer, I'm looking forward to my first moose of the season, of course from a distance, but I do look forward to seeing one of them. Thousands of people, thousands of more people today are going outside and enjoying nature because we have that opportunity. And the pandemic, for better or worse, has brought that opportunity to us. The pandemic has made us realize that we want more timber, we want more nature. We want more conservation, we want more good, sustainable management. We want those forests to be there when the next pandemic hits. Forests have been there before humanity, and forests will be there after humanity is gone. It is us who needs them. And that's why we want them to be conserved, we want them to be preserved, yet we want them to be well managed. That's where forest economics comes in. Looking at our values as a society, it can help us find the balance for strict conservation, for active, good, sound management, so that in the balance, we can meet our demands, we can fulfill our needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to fulfill their future and yet unknown expectations and values. That's where forest economics helps address the issue of sustainability. Because economics, it is a lot more than money. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Francisco Aguilar, and welcome back to your seat. And to the audience, please send us your questions to Francisco, and I will send them further to Francisco. So I'll just have a look here. Well, Francisco, how interesting to find the balance. At the moment, we have a quite polarized media debate about how to use and how to manage Swedish forests, and you were into it in your lecture. I guess the polarization is a very clear expression of different values. And could you say something more about what you think as a researcher when you listen to this debate?
I think it's great that we have people in society who are engaged in that process. It's wonderful to have values and to have the ability and the freedom to be able to express them. We cannot do it in other parts of the world. I think it's a privilege. But if we take these very extreme views, any extremism, any absolutism will not be helpful towards sustainability. We can have our strong values, but we need to be able to find a Swedish compromise, a Swedish agreement in terms of how we want those forests to be managed. And I think it's possible, but we'll need to engage in a conversation and move away from any extreme position.
So what would be your advice to the stakeholders involved in this debate and this conflict between conservation and forest management? How should they act?
I think it's very good to have a sincere dialogue. It's very important to have our own values for what we want for forests, but recognize that as a society we need to find outcomes that respond not just to our needs, but the needs of future generations and different members of society. So last week already, there was an article in the New York Times, and for anyone who is interested, if you want to Google booming, BOO as in boom, a booming business in American forests, you will get to an article that talks about this issue of wood pellets and wood energy and exports of pellets from the US to Europe. And I mentioned that not beyond because I was quoted and some of my research was showcased there, but the point being is the type of journalism displayed in that article Um, the New York Times, and the article was republished in the Seattle Times later, it shows a human face. There are people involved in this process who have a positive and a negative impact. There is no just one perspective that counts. We have to look at different perspectives. To answer your question, Malin, I think that's what we need. We need to really step on someone else's shoes. And it will help us move away from some extreme views.
But to what extent would you say that the media debate represents reality? Do you think that that the debate is that polarized when you get out into the forest where people meet and stakeholders meet? What do you think? Is that
I think once you take a walk in the forest, you realize how much of a common interest we have in protecting those forests and protecting them in a way that they sustain us for the products that we need, but also the clean water that we need, the wildlife that we enjoy and we need as well. So I think, to get to your point, Malin, I think as a society we're much less polarized perhaps than what some media seems to portray.
We have a few questions from the audience here. Today we face substantial challenges in finding appropriate trade-offs between production and environmental goods and services in forest policy. Do you think that putting economic value on environmental resources would be a way ahead? Any potential problems relating to doing so?
So when we talk about economic values, and that's why the title of my presentation is Economics More Than Money, we look at the values that include the values, for instance, that the forest exists without being used. The value of resources that are not traded in a retailer store, like carbon sequestration services, carbon in soils. So it is critical, and it's very helpful when we look at values and trying to use monetary units to evaluate those values, to assess those trade-offs. I think it's critical. We need to do that. It puts a common unit of conversation to look at those values. I think the challenge remains for us to make sure everyone's values and opinions are included in that evaluation. And of all, the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is incorporating the values of future generations. That's the biggest challenge I think we're facing today.
Next question. Let's see, this is the one. Reforestation in the tropics and elsewhere is a big issue. What values could be used, do you think, to make a change in countries like Brazil? Are there new values to be discovered?
Trying to understand the question. So there are great opportunities for reforestation in the tropics. I'll probably have to call my ecologist friends in the tropics, and they would probably agree with me that one of the biggest challenges we have when it comes to reforestation in the tropics is that those forests are so diverse, so complex, that reforestation really doesn't capture in full what a natural forest provide. So there are many challenges within reforestation to try to mimic the complexities of a natural system, but there are great opportunities. And in countries across the tropics where they have engaged in a process of deforestation and degradation, I think there are opportunities for sustainable management. So some resources are extracted sustainably, and there is room to have a system where we compensate forest owners to protect those forests. But one of the big things is, again, this kind of human framework that allows the system to work. At times, laws are a little loose in other parts of the world. Enforcement is really hard to really pursue. So I think we need to look at the money. We need to look at the ecology, the legal aspects. This is fairly complex, and economics, using as a common unit of measurement, tries to capture those complexities.
I just wonder, you talked about in your lecture about the responsibility that we have as consumers, and that we need to be well informed when consuming. And then I just wonder, how powerful would you say that forest certification is as an instrument to stimulate responsibly managed forests globally?
Forest certification actually came about as a direct response to consumer concern about forests potentially being mismanaged. So I think forest certification of the management and then the communication through eco-labels, I think carries a lot of importance to consumers. So we know that steps are being taken to ensure that the products that we consume are looking after the stewardship of forest management. The challenges, of course, remain in terms of extending the principles of sustainable forestry to parts of the world where they're difficult to do, again, partly because of legal systems that are weak, property rights that are not clear, and certification carries a cost. It's not cheap for everyone to engage in certification. So I think the cost of engaging in certification is another big challenge that we face to really promote sustainability at the margin, in tropical areas especially.
Mm. We have another question about forest certification. Is the Forest Stewardship Council (FSC) marking system is the Forest Stewardship Council marking system function in regards to palm oil products? If not, can changes be driven towards such functioning?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
No,
but I'll try to
I
answer
think
it,
does the
guess,
Forest
in
Stewardship
Ursula.
Council
Yeah.
work as an instrument to? No, I'm not sure, really. I can read it again. Is the Forest Stewardship Council marking system functioning regarding to palm oil products? If not, can changes be driven towards such functioning? Should we move to the next question?
Yeah,
Maybe?
I mean, it's the one thing is, I guess, back to certification. It's a system that assures compliance with certain principles of forest management. First of all, among them, the most important is compliance with social local cultures, respecting the people engaged in the forest, indigenous communities who might depend on them. So any action that affects the well-being of local indigenous communities cannot be compatible with sustainable forestry.
We'll move to the next question. Replacing an old growth forest with fast-growing pine trees will replace the entire ecosystem of wildlife and other plants. Obviously, the original forest is not sustained. Could you address this issue?
So economics come in very, very handy, because we look at the value of the old growth forest for the value of being an old growth forest, not just its standing timber value. The value of the forest for recreational purposes, going out on a walk, like I mentioned, the value in terms of providing habitat for species that need that old growth, where young stands will not be able to support those species. Thinking of woodpeckers, for instance, and having that dead wood and other things. So economics actually looks at all those values. It's not just the timber value. Is the use value for timber, yes, or for other purposes, but also the non-use values. We put value on things for their existence, and we put value out of self-interest, but also altruistic motivations. Because we want that forest to grow old so that my kids, your kids, our grandchildren, all other generations can enjoy it. So that's actually the strength of economics. We look not just beyond timber. Financial analysis will only look at only timber values. In economics, we look at the whole big complex puzzle.
Thank you very much, Francisco Aguilar, for attending the broadcast.